Hey everyone, so what I'd like to do with you now is to show you how to do the various analyses that are required for your third computer assignment. And so for this in-class practice, we'll go through and learn how to use the various types of ANOVA and also regression that you need to be familiar with. And what I want you to notice first off is that we're going to start with the data file as it's been modified after the work that we've done previously. If you've been making the changes that have been documented through the in-class and out-of-class portions all along, then you can just start with your data set. But if you want to go ahead and download this one from Canvas, then you'll know that you're starting at the same point that I am. Okay, so for all of these, there's some instructions here that kind of give you a general overview. I'm not going to read that to you now, but you can read that on your own. But what we're going to do then is get right into it. And so there's this bolded spot here that tells you that the first thing that we need to do is that we need to remember that for these first three questions, we're only going to be looking at a subset of the data. So we only want to look at 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. And so hopefully from previous work, you remember how to do that. We'll give you a second to think about that while I switch over to the SPSS file. But essentially what you'll want to do is to first limit the analyses to just those participants, and then you're going to go on and conduct the analyses that are required here. Now these first three are all one-way ANOVAs, and I tell you that up here, but let's look at those and make sure we understand why that's the case. So the first question says, are there differences in the amount of TV watched between the different grades? So if you think about this, the dependent variable is the amount of TV that's watched, and then the independent variable is the different grades, which is one variable with 3 levels. Since students can only be in one grade at a time, we know that it has to be between subjects variable. Okay, so keep these things in mind. We're going to look at 7th, 8th, and 9th graders, and we're going to be looking at TV watched per week. The variable name is TV, and we're going to look at that difference as a function of grade. So let's switch over now to the data file. And if you remember, there's a data file, and then I can use this table here to go back and forth between the data file and the variable view. I'm going to go back to the data view just because I like working from that screen better. So the first thing I'm going to do is restrict my sample to 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. And the way that I do that is I go to Data, and I come down here and I say Select Cases. When I select cases, I'm going to select only those cases that meet the condition that I'm about to specify. And so I click that radio button, and then I hit If. And that brings me into this screen where now I can tell it what defines the people I'm interested in looking at. And so if you sort of look down here, you can see that here's a variable that's called grade, and that's the variable that we're going to shoot in over here. So we want students who are in 7th grade. Then we can say OR, and this vertical line is the symbol that's used for OR. Students who are in 8th grade. We click that OR again, and then we say OR students who are in 9th grade. And we'll hit Continue, and we'll hit Paste so that we have that in a syntax window. And then we'll go ahead and highlight the relevant command language, hit the green arrow, and that's going to run that selection request. So now if I go back over into my data set, you can see over here on the left that some of the numbers are have a line through them. And so that means that those individuals will not be included in the analyses. And then you can also, I don't know if I showed this to you before, but you can notice over here that it says filter on, so that's a way too of knowing that not all the participants have been included. So the next thing we're going to do then is that we're going to use the one-way analysis. And so you come up here to the menu that says Analyze, and when you scroll down you can see that here's a place to compare means, and we can compare means using a one-way ANOVA. So I click on one-way ANOVA, and I'm going to look over here for the dependent variable that I'm interested in. And again, you want to make sure that the variable name that's in the brackets matches the name that's in the assignment that you're working on. So we're looking for TV, and this is TV watching at wave 1. Just put that in here. And then our factor, that means the same thing as independent variable. Our factor is grade, and so I shoot that in here. So once we've done that, then we're going to want to choose the options that we're interested in. Since we know we have 3 levels of grade, we're going to want to do a post hoc. And we'll choose Tukey's, since that's the Tukey's honestly significant difference that we've learned how to use in hand, do by hand. We'll hit Continue. And then we're also going to want options so that we can get descriptive statistics, and that's in case the results come out to be significant. So we paste that, it'll go into our syntax window, and now I can run this one-way ANOVA. And the output that you get is going to consist of several parts. There's descriptives at the top, here's the ANOVA, here's the post hoc tests, and then the homogeneous subsets kind of shows you the same thing that the post hoc test shows you. So the place that we're going to look first is in this ANOVA table, and I'm going to double click it so that I can edit it and highlight the cells that I'm interested in. So if you look at this table, it looks very much like the source tables that you've worked in class that we've done together by hand. Going down, we've got the between groups variance, the within groups variance, and the total variance. We've got sums of squares, degrees of freedom, mean square, F, and significance level going across. And so to report our findings, we're going to report the degrees of freedom for the numerator, 2, and the denominator, 3061, the F value that we get, and then SPSS tells us the significance level. We don't have to look it up in a table on the back of the book. I right-clicked on those cells, and now I'm going to change the background and make them green. I chose green because it's significant, and I know it's significant because this value of 0.001 is less than 0.05. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over to my computer assignment, and I'm going to type in the answer here essentially. So I'm just going to put this, and if you would again, please use red font. That would help me out when I go to grade your assignments. And what you see here then is that I'm just writing a sentence that says there is a significant difference. It's significant because p is less than 0.05 in the amount of TV watched per week, that's the dependent variable, as a function of grade, that's the independent variable. And then I put F with 2 and 3061 degrees of freedom, which I got from the ANOVA table, equals 6.62, which I got from the table. And I know that P in this case is actually equal exactly to 0.001. Depending on what style you're following, you could just write that as, you can write it as exactly what it's equal to, or you can write it as less than 0.01 or less than 0.05. So now let's go back to our SPS output and look more closely at what we find from the post hoc test. So we know there's a significant difference, so now we need to see which level is different from which other level. And this table, I think, is just really nice and easy to look at. In some ways it's confusing, I guess, because there's redundant information. But in this first row, it's showing 7th graders versus 8th and 9th graders. Here it shows 8th graders versus 7th graders. We already knew about that comparison, but it shows 8th graders versus 9th graders. So basically, you've got all of your information just by looking at 3 of the rows. So the ones that have a star next to them, that's just an easy way of the computer essentially showing us which ones are significant. And so when you look at these, again, I'm just going to highlight them to make them easy to stand out. You see that the 7th graders have a significantly different hours of TV watching than 8th graders and also the 9th graders, and that's because those mean differences were significant relative to the criterion. The only comparison that hasn't been made then is 8th and 9th graders, and if you look at 8th and 9th graders in this cell, I think I misspoke a minute ago, so forgive me, but this is the other cell that's unique. Then you see that there's not a significant difference between 8th and 9th graders. So then you can come back up here to the means, and this is where you're going to get the means and standard deviations that you're going to present in a sentence. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to write that post hoc information into our conclusion. So I'm going to write here that 7th graders watch significantly more TV, and then I get their mean and standard deviation from up here, as compared to 8th graders and 9th graders. And then it's important to add that last comparison and just tell me what you found by saying that 8th and 9th graders are not significantly different from one another. And I guess I could make this a little bit better by saying P greater than 0.05, and I could make this a little bit better by saying P less than 0.05. Okay, so now let's take a look at number 2. And question number 2, you'll notice, is very much like question number 1. The only thing really that's different is that it's asking now if there are differences in the hours of video games played per week, and the variable name is going to be videos, as a function of grade. Clearly this is a one-way analysis of variance again, so we can go over to our data and think about running that one-way analysis of variance. So to do that, you go to Analyze, and then you come to Compare Means, and then the choice we want is one-way ANOVA. And the stuff we had in there before is still there, so we have choices here. We can hit Reset, and that'll blow everything away on this screen, or we can just replace TV with videos. We just have to scroll over here and find videos. We'll put videos in here. Now we're running a different analysis of variance with a different dependent variable. Since we didn't hit Reset, our post hoc is still there, and our options are still there. But if you had hit Reset, you would have to choose those things again. So now we're going to hit Paste, and that is going to put that command language into the syntax window. And so you can see, and this is where it can be really nice as you get more comfortable with the syntax, that this syntax looks exactly like this, the only difference being what the dependent variable is. So now I can highlight this and hit run, and I'm going to get output that looks very similar to what we just did. So the first place that I'm going to look is in the ANOVA table, and what you'll notice here is that the significance for this analysis of variance is greater than 0.05. 0.955, it's a really big number, much greater than 0.05. Makes sense given this extremely small f value. So what we're going to do is we're just going to highlight these cells that we need the information from. I hold down Control so that I don't get everything in the middle. I right click, click Cell Properties, click Background, and I'm going to click Red this time because it's a non-significant difference. The reason I like this, you'll see now, if I scroll back up here, I can just at a glance say, okay, here's a significant one, here's a non-significant one. Okay, so now that we've got that information, we need to write that into our assignment. So we're just going to put in our conclusion statement. I don't know why it has to do that. Irritating. Okay, but our conclusion statement is going to say there is not a significant difference in hours of video games played per week, that's the dependent variable, between the different grades. And then I put my F with the denominator of, with the number 2 for the numerator and the number 3067 for the denominator. The value actually rounds up to be about 0.05, and that is greater than 0.05. So do we need to look at our post hocs? No, of course we don't, right? Because it's a non-significant difference, so it doesn't make any sense to look at the post hocs. But if you look at the output that SPSS gave us anyway, you can see here that there are no stars over here. So none of the grades were significantly different from one another, which makes sense given that the overall ANOVA was not significant. So now I just want you to go ahead and do problem number 3 on your own. That one will just give you another opportunity to look at a one-way analysis of variance to make sure you understand how to run it and how to interpret the output.